So I want to build one of those pedal-operated clamping systems so that I can use a draw knife easily while straddling the bench. So it's going to look something like this. Here's my bench seen from the side. I'm leaving out some parts here, just only showing the essentials. I'm going to have this kick piece on the floor that pivots. And it pivots right there. It's about 18 inches long. This is called that X. I don't know exactly how long it's going to be. And then from the point it pivots to this short leg is much smaller. It's like 1/6 as much. It's going to be about 3 inches. So that's X over 6. It means when you swing that pedal forward, say you swing it a foot, it's only going to pull down on that short arm about 2 inches. Okay, so that gives you a lot of mechanical advantage right there. This pivot will run all the way across, so it's really, it's got a kicker on both sides. Now, there's a slanting sort of auxiliary table ramp up here to put the workpiece up at the right height to work on. And then I have a sort of a harness that comes up over the work, a wooden frame that's going to be pulled down. In this case, it'll be pulled down up to 3 inches or so as you push the foot kick forward. It'll pull that down, squeezing your work between the board and that sort of top harness device. I'm just guessing about what the proportion should be, but it looks like you get a lot of power out of a fairly small amount of foot pressure. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to make the vertical pieces, the sort of linkage stuff, out of this really cheap CDX plywood. I think this is 13/16 because it's tongue and groove sheathing. It's construction lumber basically, but it's strong and its thickness is good. That'll give it a little bit of stiffness. You could probably get away with something a lot weaker, but this has the virtue of being sitting right here at hand, so I don't have to go buy anything. So I'm just cutting the pieces out on the bandsaw. I'm going to cut them pretty closely to shape, and then I'm going to nail them together with a couple of finish nails, and so that I can just sand them together to make them exactly the same size, and I'll drill the holes with them nailed together so that the holes will all line up perfectly. You could do it with measurements, but it's easier to just do it all together. Oh, look, there you can see I've already nailed them together. I'm cutting out the second one that way. Initially, I was just going to have the pins go through a single sheet of plywood on the bottom half of the linkage, through a single sheet of plywood on the top half of the linkage. But I decided instead to actually make a joint. There's going to be a spacer, so the top half of the linkage is sandwiched on 2 sides. You'll see that in a minute. So here I'm going to just drill those holes with a Forstner bit, nice snug 1/2-inch holes, and you'll see how the spacing thing works out in a minute. So before I put those spacers on, I'm actually going to assemble it and hang it. For no special reason. I could go ahead and put them on now. You'll notice I actually had sized the ends of this end grain first. I guess I didn't show that, but I coat them lightly with glue and smooth it out real well first. Let it dry, and then glue the boards onto the end grain. That stops the end grain from soaking all the wood out and giving you a dry joint. So I'm just clamping them up, leaving them there for an hour, and then I drill them and put screws in them afterwards. So here it is assembled. If you notice, there's a little ring of screws at the bottom and a half-inch hole in the middle. Gluing it first and then putting the screws in keeps the screws from splitting the wood, because the glue holds it, prevents it from splitting, and it makes it rather stronger. The combination of glues and screws is outrageously strong. So that's how it hangs, and you can see how much that bottom moves to get a good for a small amount of pull. These are the foot pedals. I happen to have some long half-inch bolts that I'll just sink in there, a little bit of epoxy, leave 3 inches sticking out. That's plenty. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. I could always put a little pedal on it to make it look pretty. This is the spacer I was talking about. These are gonna sort of form an elbow, so that the joint that pulls is better supported. I don't know if it's really necessary, but it just seemed a little more kosher somehow. That's the other side there. I'm just using it as a spacer for the moment. Once this is dry, I'll take it out. So I epoxied those pedals in, and here I'm just sort of test fitting it, putting there's a lag bolt that holds the pin on each side. That's more than adequate for this. You see how it swings on there. And you'll notice that in the 2 upper pieces, I've got, I guess, 6 holes or so that let me get a wider or narrower throat, so that it'll still have a couple of inches of pull, even if whether it's 8 inches high or just for a piece of 1x. The flat platform that the carriage pulls down against, that's at a slant. So I'm going to make some wedged block to hold that up, sort of between the slanted board and the flat top of the bench. So this is really just gluing up a couple of slanted blocks for that. Just glued them together, let them dry, and then planed them square. So I'm going to just saw out these sort of wedge-shaped components for the support underneath the slanted tabletop. Nothing interesting here, just cut them out on a bandsaw, and then I'm going to glue them together, and then plane them flat and glue them together the other way. You'll see. There's nothing much to this, except it does give me a chance to just show an interesting way to use the bench top to clamp things up. I've just pulled up those bench dogs at the end, and now I'll just stick a couple wedges in those other holes and just drive a couple of wedges in to hold it tight together. It's kind of a nifty trick. I learned this trick from a guy in Woodworking Unplugged, which I think is out of Wales. He's got a Welsh sounding accent. Very, very low budget, no frills site, but he shows some awesome stuff about how to do woodworking with really simple tools and Roman benches and things like that. That's Woodworking Unplugged. You can Google it up. The guy's awesome though. Really very informative, very dense with information on how to do things like this. The flat work surface, I only made that 8 inches wide. I must have lost my mind a little bit. The bench itself is 13 and a half or 13 and a quarter. I think it's 13 and a half inches wide. And I should have made it the full width, because you see those slots in the vertical piece of the linkage. They were supposed to ride in a half-inch lag bolt that would be shoved into the side of this flat work surface that I'm making here. And I just wasn't thinking that it has to be the full width for that to work. So those slots don't really do anything. Fortunately, it turns out they don't seem really necessary. So maybe at some point I'll make up another flat work surface. That work surface is just two layers of that 13/16 plywood glued together. That's all it is. So I'm just going to glue that block on the bottom so that just basically so it doesn't get lost more than anything else. So I'll just glue that up, and we're really almost done here. Just a couple more steps. I cut a sort of diagonal slot in the back of it. I'm not sure if I showed it, me doing it, but where the tail end of this work surface is, it hooks over the bench in the back. Now you're always pulling on it, you're not pushing on it, but you do need a way to keep it from sliding forward. So what I've done here, if you'll watch, I'm going to put 2 pins in it down into the bench, but notice I'm putting them way out of vertical. They're almost going in a V sort of angle there. They lean way out, and they also lean towards this end of the bench as well slightly. That's for a reason. That means that they can't pull out. You either have to pull the plugs out that are holding the top down, or take a dowel and knock them all the way through. Because being at an angle like that, you've basically locked it to the surface. You see what an angle they're drilled at? So now I'll just shove the first one in. Now you could easily pull just one out because it doesn't have to bend the plug to come out. But to pull them both out at once when they go into the V like that would be very, very hard. You'd have to break the plugs, I think. See? Just a minor trick to remember. That works with nails too, by the way. It's always good to nail things at opposing angles. Using 4x4 for this next bit is definitely overkill, but it was just what I happened to have around. A couple of pieces of 2x4 would have been fine. These are just I'll just wedge them into those holes, and that holds the whole thing inside to side. It makes rather a big pile of wood there. It's all way overbuilt, but it was just what was laying around. So I just tapped them in, and now see, you're starting to see how it all works now. So that kick plate really does move it up and down just a couple of inches for the whole swing. So we really only have one big piece left, which is the actual pressure piece that does the squeezing. I just plowed a 1/2 inch wide groove in that block of sapele wood, and then cut a 1/2 inch wide strip that I can fill it up with again. There, you just saw it. I just put the 1/2 inch bar in there, then glued the block of wood back in and planed it back smooth. So I'm just going to trim these this piece of rod off. I'll drill a couple holes for some cotter pins so it's removable. Alright, so let's give this thing a try. This is an old spoke draw knife. Holy cow. No pressure at all. I mean, I'm barely, my foot's barely even touching the pedal. Like a pound, 2 pounds of pressure. I don't think you can pull it out. That's pretty good. Yeah, so if I wanted to make vampire steaks, this is definitely the tool. Do something a little more delicate now.
I'm serious, my feet are just resting on it. I'm not pushing at all. It takes nothing. Because that's 6-to-1 reduction ratio right there. But then if you have a little bit of pressure on it and you're pulling, it's actually trying to get tighter because of the slight angle of the swing. So once it's sort of pushing on the wood, I think almost as long as you just kept even the slightest pressure on the pedal, and it's just not going to move at all. You know, I want to hold a little tighter because I'm pushing on the side. It doesn't take much. Any vampires come around here, they are doomed back to their undead state. Yikes. That's pretty great. All right, so I made this thing so it'll go up to about 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's 6 inches higher. Plus, I guess we could use the top, so it'll hold something up to about that thick on that plank, which is pretty big. I mean, that's bigger than anything you'd ever want to put in there, I imagine. This is just an iron rod that runs all the way through this board to here. It allows this to swivel so that you're not meeting the wood with a corner or anything like that. It'll flatten. I'm thinking I might put a little leather on the bottom of this and a little leather on here. Of course, now you notice this all just knocks apart. The only thing that's bolted on at all is this bolt and the one on the other side. And those are just lags. Just they come out. You can take them out in 1 minute, no problem. The rest should just come apart. This is more work than I thought it would be because most of the work is figuring out how it's going to work. But wow, it's a blast. I love this. Now I have to start making lots of long, skinny things so that I can use this. I think I can already see that it would be good to have some pins in here so that I can anchor things with pins so they don't go side to side like that. Might be a little bit of a design problem here, not having this further forward. I think that probably wasn't a good choice. I should probably rework this a little bit, which just means taking an inch off the bottom. That'll slide the whole thing back. I wanted it to line up with these notches so that I could take advantage of them with just wedges to just hold the thing together. And that works really well. There's no way it's moving side to side. The reason for doing that is that rather than just say bolting this to the top, which would probably be almost as easy, is that this solid, 13.5-inch wide piece of wood swells more than a little bit. It's now almost 3/8 of an inch smaller than it was when I made it because it's bone dry down here because it's winter time. But as soon as it's not winter time, it's going to go right back to that other size. And then you too can make vampire steaks.